Happy Monday. So we're going to continue reading Watchdog today. So we're going to do chapters 11 and 12. If you've missed chapters 1 through 10, you can check out either our Facebook feed and go through those, or so go to our YouTube channel. They're posted up there as well. So our YouTube channel is Keller Rangers. Very simple, very easy to remember. So without further ado, here we go. Chapter 11 of Watchdog. On a Saturday afternoon, the sidewalk outside the Planet Lucky Gambling Emporium was like a street fair, with vendors selling everything from fedoras to super caffeinated fruit juice and card tables set up by small-time operators offering every sort of game of chance, most of them probably fixed. There weren't many kids around, but the looks they got as they crossed the street were probably because they had a watchdog with them, not because they were kids. It seemed like everyone was suddenly interested in watchdogs, the same way some people were fascinated by jacked up trucks and sports cars with flames painted on the sides. Something about custom machines got people's blood pumping. As soon as they took up a spot along the sidewalk and Vic told Daisy to sit down, people started coming up to look at her. He'd been awake half the night worrying about how two kids would get a bunch of grown-up gamblers' attention. It turned out to be no problem at all. The guy with slick back hair, wearing an old white suit, leaned in close to Daisy's face. "What sort of programming does she have?" "It's all custom work," Vic said, trying to sound older than he was. "You looking to sell her?" the guy asked. He said it like he didn't care one way or another. Tara huffed and started to speak, even though Vic had asked her over and over to let him handle this. Vic spoke over her. "We're just showing her off a little." "I'll bet you $50 my watchdog can clean up all the trash around here," Tara blurted. Vic wanted to scream. He'd planned this all out. How he was going to move the conversation around to the trash and lead up to the bet, all the time acting like a dumb sucker kid. The man chuckled at Tara and ran his hand through his greased hair. "That's a nice piece of work, little lady, but as far as I can see, it's still a robot." Vic had thought long and hard about what sort of bet he could win with Daisy. Clearing trash was easy for people, but impossible for a bot. Too many decisions without clear rules to follow. You could tell them to throw out everything on the ground that was not a person or a chair. They could do that just fine. But don't ask them to figure out what was trash and what was someone's coffee. They'd sit on the ground beside their chair between sips. Vic pinched his chin, trying to look like a sucker. "I don't know. I think she might be able to. She's awfully smart." Laughing, the man turned to an older guy sitting behind a nearby table. "Hey Jay, you hear this? Their watchdog can clean up all the trash for us. What do you think?" "But I think I'd better hang on to my shoes or they'll end up in the trash." Others nearby laughed at the crack. "Oh yeah?" Tara said. "I'll bet you she can do it. $100. Bud stopped smiling. "Let me see your $100." Vic folded his arms to keep his hands from shaking. "We'll put up our watchdog against your 100. Jay, the old guy behind the table, stood. "I'll take that bet." Bud took a step toward Jay's table. "It's my bet. They offered it to me." Jay raised his hands and sat back down. "Fine, it's your bet." He didn't look happy about it, though. He was going to feel a whole lot better about it in a couple minutes. "We need a moderator here," Bud called while he waved like he was flagging a taxi. A large woman with graying hair hurried over. "I'll do it. What are you betting?" Bud tilted his head and smiled. "These young people here believe their watchdog can clean up all the trash, and only the trash, in this area. I'm betting $100 against their watchdog that it can't." The woman looked at Vic. "You sure you want to make that bet?" "Yes." $100. Man, could they use $100? The woman tilted her head and gave Vic a long look. "All right, then." She put one hand on her hip and then pointed out the area that would be included in the wager. No one seemed to notice that Daisy was watching with interest, acting nothing like a dumb bot. "My word is final on whether something is trash, and my fee is $5, paid by the winner." Vic nodded. So did Bud. "Here you go." Jay held out a plastic bag to put the trash in. He gave Vic a look like, "You poor little stupid kid," as Vic thanked him. "Let's go, then." The moderator folded her arms. Tara took the bag from Vic and squatted next to Daisy. She handed Daisy the bag. "You know what to do. Sorry we couldn't think up something more dignified to bet on." Daisy accepted the bag. This being Chicago, the ground was littered with wrappers, styrofoam cups, a smashed phone, even a ratty sneaker with half the sole gone. Daisy started in one corner of the area the woman had pointed out. As she approached Jay's table, Vic could see Bud grin. Jay had set his beat-up phone down beside the chair. "I want you to remember this," Jay said to Bud. "You done it on purpose." Daisy picked up the phone, sat on her haunches, examined it to see that it worked, and then set it back down. Wait a minute! Bud was scowling, suddenly not enjoying himself so much. Daisy scanned the surface of Jay's table, then lifted a styrofoam coffee cup and looked into it. There was a half-inch of coffee in it. She set it back down, then picked up the Snickers candy bag bar wrapper sitting beside it and tossed it in the bag. Go, Daisy! Tara jumped up and down, her arms raised in the air. When the discarded sneaker went into the bag, Bud had seen enough. He pointed at Vic. They're cheating. How are they cheating? The moderator asked. She didn't sound skeptical, more like she desperately wanted to know how Daisy was doing what she was doing. Bud sputtered. I don't know exactly. No watchdog can do what the one is doing. Maybe one of their friends is hiding in there. A small crowd had formed. They muttered in astonishment and cried out in surprise as Daisy tossed a smashed phone into the bag. $100, $100, Tara sang. Daisy paused at a piece of gum partially stuck to the pavement. She looked up at Vic. No coaching, Bud shouted. It's a forfeit if you coach. Daisy looked at Bud before plucking up the gum and dropping it in the bag just to be safe. Vic was certain if Daisy could make facial expressions, she would have been glaring at him. When the area was spotless, Daisy handed the bag to Vic. $100, $100, Tara sang louder. Hang on, the woman said. I want to take a look at your watchdog. She bent close to Daisy, moved her head from side to side, trying to see into Daisy's seams, to make sure there wasn't a kid crouched in there. Finally, she straightened. It's a robot. Then how can it do what it just did? Bud asked. You got me, but you owe them $100. Bud folded his arms, making no attempt to reach into his pocket. Daisy, that man owes us $100, Tara said. Daisy walked over to Bud and then rose on her hind legs until her face was inches from him. The awful scraping metal sound of her growl rose from deep in her throat. Bud took out his wallet, counted out $100, and handed it to Vic. Vic paid the woman her $5, and then they left skipping down the street, both of them singing, $100, $100, and laughing like crazy. With real money in his pocket for the first time since Mom had died, passing faces seemed friendlier and colors seemed brighter. All these months he'd been telling Tara they could lift themselves out of the mess they were in. But he hadn't really believed it, not deep down. Now he did. He reached over and patted Tara's back. You did it. You saved us. I'm so proud of you. Mom would be too. Tara gave him a big wide grin. Now I want to have some fun. What kind of fun? Tara threw her hands in the air. Real fun, like we used to. She ticked ideas off her fingers. Cubs game, Art Institute, Ferris wheel, mini golf, Buckingham Fountain. That sounded so great to Vic, but some of those things were probably really expensive. How about just the Ferris wheel and the fountain? Tara shook her head emphatically. All of it. Downtown fun day, like we used to have with Mom. But we don't want to spend all the money we just made. We won't spend all of it, just some of it. She grabbed his arm and pulled. Come on. You're pulling me the wrong way. Wrigley Field is that way. At least he thought it was. He was pretty sure it was a long way off. They'd have to take the L. Vic felt nervous about spending so much money when they'd barely had enough to eat for the past few months. But now that they had Daisy, it wasn't like they had to worry about going hungry. And maybe they could pull the same stunt outside the gambling emporium a couple more times before word got around. By then, Vic would have to come up with another way to make money with Daisy. Chapter 12. Heading into the nice part of the city was like traveling forward through time. In the ghettos, there were no robots, and the buildings were dingy, the brick blackened by pollution. As they crossed West Fullerton on the L, there was less brick and steel, more carbon fiber, the clean, colorful buildings twisting and swooping into the sky like they were made of taffy. By the time they reached North Avenue, most people Vic saw out the window of the train had domestic robots trailing them. Some of the robots resembled people. A few were even dressed in human clothes. Others walked on all fours or sixes, like big, colorful cartoon bugs. Most of the vehicles were sleek, auto-driven jobs that looked like they were made of colored ice. Inside a passing shop, Vic could see waist-high munchkin robots scurrying around. The day they were kicked out of their apartment, Vic had headed toward this part of town, because it was safe here. There were lots of police around, both public and private. A half hour after Vic and Tara had arrived, they were picked up by the police. Vic had been so relieved, he thought they were saved, that the police would help them. The police drove them to the bad part of town and dropped them off in front of a shelter. Vic could see the policewoman's face as she opened the cruiser's rear door to let them out, her eyes bored as she told them they'd have somewhere to sleep in that part of town. I feel much better here. Tara's watching out the L's window in the seat next to Vic. The inside of my head always feels like whatever I'm looking at. When we're in the dump, Feels like garbage. When we're here, feels neat and clean. Vic grinned at that. Tara had an odd way of putting things sometimes, but he understood what she was saying. I'm glad you thought of it. The train slowed. Here's our stop. Vic glanced to the back of the car where Daisy was squatting in the robot storage area. He signaled that this was their stop, and Daisy nodded. Moments later, they were on the clean streets of Grant Park. Tara raced past the twin line statues that bookended the entrance to the Art Institute, reciting at high volume, American Gothic by Grant Wood, Nighthawks by Edward Hopper, Paris Street, Rainy Day by Gustave Caillebotte, Yellow Hickory Leaves with Daisy by Georgia O'Keeffe. Vic was relieved to see that kids under 14 were only $5 each. The guards didn't say a word about Daisy as they passed through the entrance. A few other people had domestic robots with them, pushing carriages or just following them. Vic followed Tara as she headed toward the first work on her list. She always visited the same paintings, and it was exactly that, visiting. To Tara, the paintings were just as alive as her t-shirts and Chloe. Each painting was a friend. Sometimes Vic envied her imagination. Hello, American Gothic by Grant Wood. She waved at American Gothic and moved on excitedly to the next painting on her list. She'd hated going to the Art Institute, until Mom got her to make a list of the paintings she was going to see. Once she had that list, she couldn't wait. Vic's chest got tight, remembering the trips they'd taken there with Mom. Mom hadn't graduated from high school, but she always pushed them to do smart things. Visit museums, see plays instead of movies. She loved trashy romance novels, but her rule for herself was she had to read one classic, Moby Dick or Jane Eyre, for every trashy romance she read. No matter how boring the book turned out to be, she read every word. Daisy had to wait outside Wrigley Field while they watched the Cubs game. Tara cheered wildly for the Cubs. She didn't know any of the players, she just liked to cheer. She especially liked it when the crowd did the wave. Noise and chaos bothered a lot of people with autism, but it never bothered Tara, as long as it was happy noise and happy chaos. The wheel on the Navy Pier had big, roomy gondola cars, and there was no line and plenty of empty space, so when Tara asked if Daisy could ride with them, the ticket taker waved her on without a word. The ride cost 24 precious dollars, but while they glided along, the lake on one side, the city on the other, Vic felt like a normal kid. It was like the hunger and cold, the threats and taunts from people on the streets, had all been a bad dream. When the ride ended, Tara was hopping around like she had to go to the bathroom as they wandered toward Grant Park. This is the best day. Cubs win, 100 paintings, 10 revolutions on the Ferris wheel, an epic day. Vic couldn't argue. He felt like he was walking on air. He took in the fountain up ahead, 3 tiers of water cascading and spraying into the air, surrounded by bronze sea monsters. With Daisy watching over them, they could finally come out of the shadows. One way or another, there would be more money coming in. If Vic couldn't think of anything else, Daisy could always repair electronics day and night. Maybe they could start that business Vic had been thinking about, buying broken TVs and stuff and fixing them to resell. They would rent an apartment. Maybe next fall they could go back to school. Last stop of the day, Buckingham Fountain. Tara's gaze suddenly shifted. Oh, Italian ice. She pointed at a silver cart with a red and white umbrella, where a silver-faced robot was scooping Italian ice into paper cups. I want raspberry. She ran toward the cart. Come on, Daisy. Looks like we're getting Italian ice. Which you can go to Galveston, 61st and Seawall. There's a place called Rita's Italian Ice. It's delicious. Also go to the Heights. Rita's also there. It's from Philly. Come on, Daisy. Looks like we're getting Italian ice. Vic jogged after Tara, soaking up her good cheer like it was a vitamin he was deficient in. In short order, Tara's mouth was blue. Vic tipped his paper cup and drank down some of the melted juice, knowing his own mouth was a smear of orange. An old man, his spine bent so badly he had to crane his neck to look straight ahead, shuffled toward them. He held out his hand as he drew close. We don't have any money. Usually one look at Vic was enough to tell people that he couldn't afford to give handouts. No, I'm supposed to give you this. The old man raised his hand higher. Now Vic saw he was holding a plastic, wafer-thin phone. Who's it from? From the lady who's going to call you on it. The old man shoved the phone toward Vic. Just take it so I can go home. Vic accepted the phone. As he studied it, it rang. Before Vic could decide what he wanted to do, the screen expanded to the size of a sheet of paper. Miss Alba's face filled it. Dun dun dun. Do you understand how much trouble you're in? I mean, do you fully grasp it? Miss Alba asked. The question caught Vic off guard. Just leave us alone. We're not bothering you. He looked around for Tara. She was over by the fountain. You're not bothering me? You mean besides stealing from me? We didn't steal anything. Vic closed his mouth. He'd been wondering if she'd figured out they had the chip. That answered his question. One of my friends caught your act outside the Emporium, she said. Cute. Her face was like a mask. She showed no expression at all, just a cool, controlled, businesslike neutral. And Vic suddenly remembered that he had orange lips. Here's the deal. Give me my chip and you'll get a full pardon. None of my people will bother you. They'll spread the word that you're under my protection. Once she had the chip and Daisy was gone, Miss Alba would take them back to the sweatshop or worse. Vic had no doubt. Who would be dumb enough to trust a woman who imprisoned kids in a sweatshop? Vic licked his dry lips and tried to sound cool and calm. You know what? I'm going to go with no. Miss Alba tilted her head, just a hint of annoyance seeping into her tone. Little boy, one way or another, I'm getting that chip back. Are you sure you don't want to do it so we walk away as friends? I'm sure. Vic put on his best cheery tone. You have a nice day now. Bye-bye. He disconnected and stuffed the phone into his pocket. Suddenly, he felt terribly exposed standing in the square. He raced over to Daisy, who was halfway between him and Tara, ever watching. Time to find our new home. Watch for danger. The people who want to hurt us know where we are. Daisy nodded. Tara, Vic called, we have to get going. Tara ignored him or didn't hear him. She was staring up at the water cascading down the 3 tiers of the fountain. Tara, Vic called louder. This time she turned. Vic waved for her to come over. Her shoulders slumped, but she headed toward him. What's your rush? Daisy took a few steps in the opposite direction and growled, steel grinding against steel. Vic looked past Daisy with a sinking dread. A watchdog stood across the square, alone, waiting. It was the grizzly from Miss Alba's sweatshop. A jet-black steel hulk, even bigger than tiny. Miss Alba's black Maserati was parked at the curb beyond it. The grizzly let out a metallic squeal and charged at Tara as bystanders, shouting in surprise and alarm, cleared out. Daisy bolted to intercept the grizzly. The 2 watchdogs collided. Daisy was knocked backward by the force of the much bigger grizzly, but stayed on her feet. The grizzly slashed Daisy's head with claws as long as Vic's forearm, knocking her onto her back. Daisy rolled to her feet and ran toward the fountain. Grizzly chased her. Vic realized this was their chance to run. Tara had stopped short of him and was watching Daisy, her hands clasped in front of her like she was praying. Tara, we have to go. Vic grasped her shoulders, but she spun out of his grip. Not taking her eyes off Daisy, he would climb to the top tier of the fountain, the high ground. Water pelted Daisy as the grizzly studied her from the ground. He climbed into the water, stood on his hind legs, grasped the lid of the second tier, and boosted himself up. He was too big and awkward to reach the top tier. Like Tiny, this grizzly thing wasn't nearly as quick or graceful as Daisy. Tara was ahead of Miss Alba's crew when it came to body design. Daisy glanced around, and Vic knew just what she was thinking at the moment. Is there something up here I can use as a weapon? But there was nothing. It was an empty bowl of water. Instead, Daisy leaped, landing on the grizzly. The 2 of them hit the lip of the second tier and tumbled into the shallow water in the wide bottom pool. The grizzly's jaws clamped down, his teeth closing inches from Daisy's face. When he opened his mouth again, Daisy reached inside, attacking something she'd spotted in there. She pulled her arm out just as the jaws clamped down again. An instant later, Daisy was up and running toward Vic and Tara. Vic grabbed Tara's hand. Run! When they reached South Michigan Avenue, Vic kept going right on into traffic. A bus screeched to a stop to avoid hitting them, or maybe to avoid hitting Daisy, who had caught up to them. Vic glanced back. Daisy had done something to the grizzly when she reached into its mouth. It was listing to one side and kept trailing off at an angle from them before correcting course. Everywhere Vic looked, people were running away. Help us, Vic called to a woman watching from a second-story window. I called the police, she shouted back. Vic was pretty sure calling the police was useless. East had said Miss Alba told the police what to do, not the other way around. They fled down LaSalle Street. Even damaged, the 4-legged grizzly closed ground quickly. Daisy dropped back, lunged, and feinted at the grizzly, trying to slow it down. Steel claws raked the sidewalk inches short of Vic's foot as they reached the bridge. Vic was gasping for breath by the time they made it across. Head down, he nearly plowed into Tara, who had stopped short. A block away, Miss Alba was standing in front of a van parked lengthwise to block off traffic, her arms folded. Vic counted 7 watchdogs spread along the street and sidewalks in front of her. Some were as big as the grizzly, others the size of raccoons. They were surrounded. Daisy stood on her hind legs to grip the door handle on a minivan and tore the locked door open. She looked at them pointedly. Vic scrambled into the front seat, right on Tara's heels. Daisy closed the door behind Vic, and turned to face the watchdogs. At least a dozen people were watching out their windows. Others had gathered a few car lengths beyond Miss Alba. More onlookers were arriving every second, none getting too close, no one stepping up to help. Although honestly, what could they do? Glancing left and right, keeping her eyes on the watchdogs, Daisy reached under the minivan and tore out its muffler pipe. She climbed onto the roof as Miss Alba's watchdogs converged around them. The biggest watchdog, now that the grizzly was trailing, reminded Vic of a gorilla. It had long front legs and shorter back ones, a flat face, more human than animal. It lunged for Daisy's back leg, pulling her off balance. Daisy swung the pipe and flattened the steel gorilla's hand. A six-legged orange thing with a head on either end, mouths full of razor teeth, leaped onto the hood of the van. One of its legs crashed through the windshield as it scrambled to get Daisy. The pipe flashed into view, shattering one of its three eyes and knocking it backward. The van was surrounded by watchdogs, snapping and slashing at Daisy. Tara shrieked and clapped her hands over her eyes. A Doberman-sized watchdog was staring into her window. It's like something out of a nightmare. It had four eyes and a wide snout, and sections of its face were painted red, yellow, and blue like some demonic clown. It drove its face right through the window. Vic wrapped his arms around Tara and backpedaled away from the thing. Tara was screaming. Vic's mouth was cranked open, but no sound was coming out because his chest was frozen. He wasn't even breathing. The thing kept coming, pushing its way into the van. When it opened its mouth, Vic expected to see a row of sharp metal teeth. Instead, there was a buzzsaw. The saw began to rotate. A high-pitched whining drowned out Tara's screams as the watchdogs struggled to reach them. Vic pushed Tara, who curled up into a ball between the seats and into the back, then scrambled after her as the blade inside the thing's mouth lunged for his leg. The van ceiling dented as Daisy leapt off, clearing outreached claws, and landed on the sidewalk. Vic heard the screech of steel against steel, and then the van was tipping. Vic fell toward the side window, landing on Tara as the thing trying to reach them suddenly went slack, its back end crushed beneath the van and the ground. Daisy had tipped the van onto it, Vic realized. Through the rear window, Vic saw Daisy on the sidewalk surrounded by watchdogs, bashing heads with the muffler pipe. Her front right paw was hanging useless, wires jutting from the wrist. The grizzly, its face crushed, charged at Daisy, eager to get at her. Probably realizing she wasn't going to be able to hold them off, Daisy stepped on the much slower grizzly's head and tried to vault over it, but the grizzly managed to clamp its huge jaws on her ankle. It jerked her to the pavement. Daisy reached up and slashed the grizzly's underside, disabling one of its hind legs and then the other. The grizzly's hind end crumpled, but it stubbornly clung to Daisy's leg as the others closed in. Daisy, oh no, Daisy! Vic had to wrap both arms around Tara to keep her from going out to help Daisy. Daisy reached down with her good hand and detached the leg the grizzly was clinging to. Freed, she charged unsteadily toward Miss Alba, who was all alone in front of her white van. Watchdogs closed in on Daisy from behind. Miss Alba didn't run. She held her ground, arms folded, expression as serene and unreadable as ever. When Daisy was 4 car lengths from her, Miss Alba shouted a command. Dozens of white rat-sized robot bodyguards surged out of the open rear door of the van. Look out! Tara screamed. Daisy veered, trying to reach the line of stores, but without her back legs, she was slow and clumsy. The tiny bodyguards swarmed up her limbs. Daisy bit the rat things off, crushing them in her long, narrow jaws as they tore off her armored protective plates. Then the big watchdogs reached her. They had to get out of there while the watchdogs were distracted. Vic pulled Tara toward the back door. He swung the latch and pushed it with both feet. The door dropped open. 100 yards away, they were tearing Daisy apart. Daisy, run! Tara shouted. Get away! Vic thought she must be losing it. Daisy couldn't run. They were all over her. A section of Daisy's lower back wriggled free and rolled to the ground. Vic squinted. None of the watchdogs had torn the piece off. It had pulled loose on its own. The piece sprouted 4 legs and ran. As it leaped onto the hood of a car and dashed from roof to trunk before springing to the next parked vehicle, Vic realized what it was. Daisy, the original Daisy. As the two-headed watchdog wrenched Big Daisy's head off her limp form, little Daisy sprinted toward freedom. The chip wasn't in her head? Vic said. Of course not, Tara said. Why in the world would you put a watchdog's brain in its head? That's the first place the enemy attacks. That was true. Still, Vic never would have thought to put a watchdog's brain in her back end. Gesturing wildly at little Daisy's fleeing form, Miss Alba raced toward her watchdogs. The little one! Get the little one! A raccoon-sized watchdog was the first to break out of the pile and give chase. The side of its head was caved in from blows from the muffler pipe, but it still moved faster than little Daisy. Run, run! Tara called. Every single watchdog gave chase. Daisy broke into the traffic on the crossing street, weaving and leaping to avoid being run over. When Miss Alba's pack reached the crossing street, they were met by screeching brakes and a chorus of honking horns. The taxi slammed into the two-headed model. It crumpled and went under the taxi's wheels. The bridge across the Chicago River was just beyond the crossing street. Even from more than a block away, Vic could see the raccoon-sized watchdog break little Daisy to the blacktop just as she reached it. She was up again in an instant later, but the much bigger watchdog pounced. Its jaws snapped closed. Tara let out an agonized, warbling scream as little Daisy's back half was crushed inside those steel jaws. Daisy struggled, pushing against the watchdog's cone-shaped snout with her front legs, but she couldn't break free. The watchdog swung its head, shaking her like a chew toy, then dropped her mangled body to the bridge's walkway. Daisy didn't give up. Her back end crushed, she dragged herself with her front paws, inching toward the railing. Miss Alba, who had just crossed the street, cried out, "Get her!" as Daisy gripped a rusted steel crossbeam and hoisted herself over the footrail, blocking her from the water. The watchdog lunged, just as Daisy, trailing severed wires, tumbled into the river. Miss Alba threw her fists in the air and howled in frustration. Vic wanted to enjoy the moment, but he couldn't. Miss Alba hadn't won, but they'd lost Daisy. "We have to run, now," Vic said. Miss Alba was at the bridge railing, peering into the deep black water of the Chicago River. But Vic had no doubt she was going to set her watchdogs on them as soon as she got over the shock. It started to rain. Vic grasped Tara's arms and pulled her back the way they'd come. Tara dug in her heels, whimpering, not wanting to leave Daisy. "She's gone, Tara. We have to run, or we'll die." Vic wiped tears from his cheek, then tugged harder. Something finally clicked inside Tara. She stopped resisting and started running. A police car passed, its blue bubble flashing. Vic wondered how long the police had been watching the chaos from a distance on Miss Alba's orders. So we'll stop there. I'll keep on reading with Chapter 13 tomorrow, so that was a little bit longer of a chapter today. Again, if you missed anything, you can check us out on our YouTube channel, Keller Rangers. We'll have that posted up there. All the previous videos are on there too, so you can check that out. Most importantly, stay safe. Make sure you're taking care of each other. And remember, Rangers is the way.